Good evening and welcome to this special mental health edition of Doctors on Call. I'm Mary Morehouse, a psychotherapist with Insight Counseling of Duluth, and I will be your host for our program tonight on child and adolescent mental health. This is the first of 4 special mental health episodes that we will be airing throughout this season of Doctors on Call. Future programs will cover the topics of grief and loss, couples and family mental health, and stress and anxiety. Our program is here to answer your questions about mental health issues that may affect you, your family, or friends. Please call or email your questions and we will do our best to address them. The telephone numbers and email addresses can be found at the bottom of your screen. Our expert guests this evening are Dr. Dan Diallard, a licensed psychologist with Duluth Psychological Clinic, Dr. Judith Christensen, a psychiatrist with St. Luke's Psychiatric Associates, and Ann Meehan, a licensed professional clinical counselor and founder of Meehan Mental Health Services. Our phone and email questions are being received this evening by members of the PBS North staff who will bring them to me here in the studio. Now let's begin with a discussion of child and adolescent mental health. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm very excited to have such great colleagues on here tonight. So let's start with you, Dr. Diallard. Tell me a little bit about your practice and the kind of work that you do.
Sure, well, I do psychotherapy with adults and couples at the Duluth Psychological Clinic, and then I do assessments with children and adolescents at Northwood Children's Services.
Okay, wonderful. Dr. Christensen.
So I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist, actually the only one in our group. I am exclusively in the outpatient setting, so I see kids pretty much ages 4 and up, and I do initial assessments and then follow up with them for medication management and oftentimes working alongside their outpatient therapist at the same clinic.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. And Ann.
I'm Ann Meehan. I founded Create Wellness Center for Child and Adolescent Therapy, and I see primarily kids 3 and up in my practice. I am a registered play therapist, so I practice play therapy, but I work with a wide variety of difficulties that come into my practice, anywhere from anxiety, trauma, depression, and a lot of big feelings. So I have a wide variety of young people I see.
Wonderful. What a great group tonight. So, child and adolescent mental health is very much in the news, more now than I believe has ever been, which is such a good thing. We're talking about it more, which is a very good thing, and I appreciate that. Dr. Diallard, I'll start with you. What sort of trends do you see that you've seen that are kind of happening now, whether it's post-COVID or not, but what sort of trends do you see in your practice right now?
2 trends come to mind. I do think even though we're, knock on wood, past the worst of COVID, there's a lag effect in the effects of COVID on family functioning. I think there's been an increase in probably anxiety presentations that I see from the kids who I work with, and also sort of an awareness that a child's academic progress got disrupted to some degree in COVID. A positive trend I see is we're all talking more candidly and openly about mental health problems. The stigma around or embarrassment around talking about it is diminishing, and that's a fabulous trend.
Yeah, I agree. Dr. Christensen, tell me about the trends you've seen.
Well, I'd have to say a lot of similarities. Anxiety disorders seem to have really flourished a little throughout COVID and thereafter. Thankfully, I would say the amount of depression that I was seeing during the more acute part of the pandemic seems to have eased up, and I really believe that's a function of kids being able to interact and connect once again. Those were incredibly hard times for kids. I mean, we talked about it a lot in the office over virtual visits, and I just spent that time thinking this is a notable, almost like a sentinel event in child development for all the kids who are living through this pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. Ann, tell me a little bit.
I agree. I feel like we were talking about COVID, and although the lockdowns and virtual school and kind of in and out in person versus virtual is, or leaving that in the past, there is such huge gaps in development, social skills, and I think any kid that was in kindergarten and up once those pandemic years started is still seeing the effects of lower self-esteem due to academic gaps or not getting things. I'm hearing that whole collective classrooms and grades are behind, and then all the social development pieces and things that were missed. And I think one of the big things I'm seeing as a part of that is when everybody was in less contact with one another, there was actually some lowered anxiety for not having to do the hard things of life, like being in the social situations or taking the hard tests. There was some ease with that, and I'm seeing kids really struggle to go back and move into the hard things. It seems really, really difficult for them.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Of people kind of you got used to kind of being comfortable with being comfortable,
Yeah.
as opposed to
Yeah.
learning to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and getting through those things, because there were a lot of times, depending on the school and the age of the child, that they didn't really have to deal with a lot of uncomfortableness
Yeah.
of schedules or things like that. So kind of going along with that, what sorts of things can parents, when they're dealing with a child, one of their children, and their child is struggling, when do you say now is a good time to come in? Like what's that kind of, and of course obviously it's different for every child, but just kind of some general things from parents saying, I'm worried about my child, that's, whether or not to try and figure out if this is developmentally appropriate or it's time to come in and see a higher level of care.
Such a relevant question.
Yeah.
I think I often start with, when I talk with parents, what have you tried? And how much have you communicated with your child about the difficulty, and how's that gone? Mm-hmm. So we'll try to maximize the family's ability to cope with it and problem solve on their own. Then the next question might be, have you talked with other relevant adults like teachers or bus drivers or neighbors or coaches, et cetera? And then if those things haven't worked, and if there's significant impairment, if the difficulty is getting in the way of age-typical tasks, mm-hmm. making and keeping friends, achieving academically, et cetera, then maybe it's time to engage a professional.
Okay. Dr. Christensen, can you?
I would agree with that, sort of using the impairment in functioning as the defining line. And I say that because if you take a look at the big book of psychiatry, a lot of the symptoms that can fall under different diagnostic criteria will happen without necessarily meeting that diagnostic criteria, mm-hmm. if we don't see that functioning that impairment in functioning. So I really talk a lot with patients about looking at the continuum of being a human being. So sometimes we might have a bit of sadness, we might be a little bit anxious before the test. That's in the realm of typical. But boy, if that anxiousness now has you locked, you go to write that test, your mind is blank, you can't remember a thing, you come out of there just like shell-shocked, you can't make any decisions. Those are the signs. I'm like, okay, maybe we've stepped over into the land of getting a little extra help on the team.
Okay, great. And do you have some things to add to that for your practice?
I think that those are all the things that I look for in my practice as well. And one of the questions that I'll ask parents and families is, how long has this been going on for your child? I tend to find that things that are a little bit more shorter termed, like I'm having some stress because of my sports season. It's hockey season, tryouts were coming. I was pretty anxious about that. But after I got into my season, the anxiety went down. Maybe it was a problem that I call a family problem, a problem that the family can solve. Mm-hmm. But if the duration is longer, that's really when I'm thinking that therapy might be helpful. And I like to talk with parents. I'm very numbers based. I'll say, if there was a pie chart of your child's life, what % of the pie would be focused on this problem? So how often would they be anxious? What % of the pie would they take up? And as they answer those questions, it becomes a little bit clearer. Is this a smaller slice of the pie? Can the family handle it? Are we moving through it? Or has the piece grown to be almost their entire day? right? So those are a couple questions I ask.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. And I know sometimes some of the things I see are just, things that are just very small blips, but seem bigger because we don't have the skills to kind of deal with some of the smaller things. Let's talk about a little bit about anxiety. So we'll pull out anxiety. What sorts of things, like, again, in a very general sense, are you seeing with kids coming in with anxiety? And then what are some tools that you feel like have been helpful with some of your clients with anxiety?
So anxiety is a feature of human functioning, and we'll always see anxiety. But I feel like the sorts of anxiety that maybe have shown up more in the last couple of years are various forms of social anxiety. A lot of kids and adolescents, as we talked about, had changes in school. They might have changed schools, they switched to virtual schooling. They had a different way of interacting with peers. And now that they're back in classrooms and back with teams, et cetera, it may be hard to just pick up in the way you related to peers in the past. So I feel like social anxiety is showing up more. I also feel like more generalized worrying. Part of what happened in COVID is I think our kids heard a lot more about adult fears. And hearing about adult fears when you're young and don't have the tools to think them through can provoke anxiety, because it's hard to know how to stop your thinking about financial difficulties or job difficulties or illness difficulties. So I would say I think I see more of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I would say I am seeing a lot more anxiety and distress around academics. I don't know why, but it just really does seem like there was that window of time where kiddos were in distance learning, and it was sort of like, oh, we're trying to figure this all out together, and it was a bit more relaxed. And then somewhere around a year, maybe like a year now, it's as if schools sort of snapped back to it's like there was never even a pandemic, let's hit this. And it's been jarring for a lot of students. They feel very overwhelmed. They seem to be struggling more than what I'd seen in the past for being able to figure out their time management. And that's probably also complicated by the fact that much more of their education is being provided using iPads, Chromebooks, using online, when these devices for a large part of their life probably were mostly just for fun, going, playing Roblox, going on Netflix. So now they have to do schoolwork on their entertainment device, which of course sort of lures them away every now and then they are getting down on themselves. Like, why can't I just get my work done? Well, I didn't have to worry about the computer I used in 1994 being so fun that I wasn't going to write my assignment. So.
I didn't even have computers when I so I think that kind of that blurring that line between these, the technology piece is great, right? There's so much at people's fingertips, but it's really easy to flip from one screen to the other when we're trying. And that Netflix tab is open right next to our math, and who wants to? I'd rather watch Netflix than do a math worksheet myself. And it's also a little sneaky to get around parents too. When they come in, oh, we're doing our work.
Yes.
Yeah.
I really am noticing with a lot of young people with anxiety that there is this almost thought that any anxiety or stress is a bad thing. And I like to work with a lot of young people on the fact that stress is actually a great thing. Stress is a little bit of stress, and anxiety is what keeps us thoughtful about others. It helps keep us motivated. It helps keep the important things at the top of the stack. And anxiety is just, essentially, I call it this flashing red warning sign that something in our life isn't quite the way that we want it to be. And if we can accept that this is my body trying to tell me something, and what might it be trying to tell me? It might be trying to tell me that I'm not so prepared for the things that I would like to do, or it might be telling me that I'm not feeling so confident in my friendships. And once we understand the message and the story that anxiety has to tell, then we can start to solve problems. And I like to work with young people in saying that, anxiety and stress can be a good thing at times, but it doesn't mean that we should pull out of situations, that we should avoid things. How do we both end? How do we both have anxiety and persist in the things that are safe and positive and good for us to do? So I think sometimes that reframe for the kids and teens that I see is incredibly helpful, because going back to COVID years, there was a lot of times where I could maybe turn off my screen, or I could walk away from a lecture, or I wasn't in the situation at the lunch table at school where I was kind of forced to develop the skills to regulate through these things.
And I think, kind of going back to that time that, all of our kids were home during those COVID and those lockdown years. Parents were more of literally helicoptering over, because they were at the kitchen table and everyone was home all day. Not everyone all the time, obviously. So between helicopter parenting and then snowplow parenting, getting everything out of the way for their children, so we don't. So they don't get anxious, so they don't get depressed, and so we can kind of take care of that. How do we as parents kind of manage that? Like, how do we know when helicopter is helping? I have a bias. I'm not a fan of online grading, that the parents get alerts every time that their child doesn't turn in an assignment, because that doesn't allow, my bias is it doesn't allow the child and the teacher to have that connection, and the child to be able to figure it out by themselves. My own bias, not a fan. But that's what we have. That's what all the parents can do. So this helicoptering, kind of going over the kids and then kind of getting everything out of the way. How do we help parents love their kids, of course, and care for their kids, and also kind of empower their kids to be able to deal with the flexibility, to deal with the anxiety? Can you speak on that? I know, a big question, right?
Big question. I think a good way into it is to really go into the metaphors. When you're helicoptering or snowplowing, you are above or ahead of your kid. When you're walking with your child, you're side by side, and you're available for consultation or co-problem solving, but you can keep assessing whether you or your child should be leading on this particular problem. Another metaphor that I find productive is manageable versus overwhelming adversity. When a child is facing manageable adversity, like it's midterms and I have an F on this class I care a lot about, then we want to help them problem solve on their own so that they can take steps on to address the problem by studying more, etc. Overwhelming anxiety paralyzes our child's ability to address the problem, and that's when we need to take a more active role. But probably still not helicoptering or snowplowing, but walking with more firmly.
Gotcha. Anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, I'm a pretty big fan of the sort of like the team approach, where I get to be in the background, aware, but not always needing to intervene. So the example you gave of those alerts that you can get, I don't pay attention to the alerts. About once a week, I'll say to myself, okay, I should probably check in and make sure that things are going okay. But what I do is each evening I'll say, like, okay, how are we doing? Like, do you think you have any outstanding work? And maybe they say, like, no. And I'm like, oh, okay. Do you want to, like, just, check on that? I'm not going to be on top of you, because I have a day job. And so my job is not managing that you get all your work done. I do think it is my job to give you a gentle reminder. I mean, my kids are younger. My twins are 11. So I'll just say, I just want you to make sure that you've done what you think you need to do to be certain that you've got your work done. So I like that scaffolding. It's sort of like being the coach, but I don't want to be out there in the game or at bat for them. I want to be the person that they can sort of go to for advice, but I'm like, you got this.
Yeah.
So
Great.
And I think with parenting, I love how you said parents are doing the helicoptering, the snow plowing, because they care so much. They care so deeply about their child, and they want their child to succeed. So it's coming from this really great place. A couple of things, a couple of lenses that I usually use when I work with parents. The first is the child developmentally able to do the task that we're expecting them to do? There are different ways as a parent I will come in and support my 5-year-old that when he is 16, I will not be doing those same things. And so is the child developmentally able to do the task that we want them to do or need them to do? And I love the coach metaphor. If they're able to, we're on the sidelines, we're that coach. And if they're not, then we're in the role of teacher. And I think really helping parents understand what is my role with my child. The other lens that I click into is it a safety issue? If it is an issue of safety, that is absolutely when parents should come in, intervene, correct in the situation. But if the child is developmentally able to do the task, it's safe for them to do the task, there's no safety issue, then as parents, I like to think that the role is we are either a secure base for them, for their child to launch out into the world and do the things they need to do, or we're a safe haven for if they went out into the world, it didn't go quite the way that they wanted it to. We can provide that nurturing and soothing and kind of asking ourselves, what hat does our child need us to wear? Because one of the things that happens, unfortunately, when we get the helicoptering and the snow plowing, and this is with very good intentions with parents, but the child will get the message under the surface that my parent doesn't believe that I'm capable. They don't believe I can do it. They don't believe I can succeed. And we really want to help kids know how awesome and capable and wonderful they are. So when we have that coach metaphor of on the sidelines, it's safe. That's when we can empower kids to do the things they need to do and have those great experiences.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite memories of with my kids and a coach is one of my kids messed up big time during a game, and the coach put them right back in because it's like, yeah, you messed up, but you got this, you can do this. And I think that if we kind of keep that going with parents, it's like, no, I think you can do it. I think I got you. Health and safety, always the line, but I think you can do this. If not, I'm here. So I like that. Kind of goes along with this, like how do relationships with parents affect children or teens? So like, again, a viewer question. So kind of like having what are the different kind of ways to have relationships with your children and teens?
Yeah, to reiterate Ann's point, which I thought was spot on, is the developmental place a child is in makes all the difference. So parents are typically going to have more of a role in helping kids maybe find and make friendships and keep them when they're younger, and are gradually going to pull back over time. Maybe again monitoring for safety, and is this peer friend or group of friends generally pro-social and have values that are consistent with our families or not. So I think developmentally you're engaged early developmentally and you pull back generally as a parent.
Okay, and another question. How do cultural differences affect kids in different households, and how are those circumstances approached? Dr. Christensen?
That is a great question because I could even speak to it. You know, as a kid growing up, culturally, I would say that my parents, my family, they were not fans of things like the ye old sleepover. And I remember being at a team meeting with my colleagues, and we were talking about sleepovers and how important they are for, you know, child development and friendships. And I was like, hold on, guys. I just want to let you know that, like, not everybody feels okay with those. Like, some people, that's like, they will never have their child go to a sleepover. I never did a sleepover as a child, me right here.
Yes.
And they're like, their jaws dropped. And I said, it's just sort of like, you know, a thing. I think most, you know, African American or, you know, Caribbean families have a bit more of a reserved stance on something like that. So that could potentially impact that social sort of scene for a kid because, you know, there is a lot that goes on. I think that interestingly, you know, for my kiddos who, you know, my parents are aware, yes, I let them go to sleepovers. And I think that it's a really cool thing because I'm really interested in how different households interact and how kids get to have like a lens into what a family life can be like other than the one that they've always known at home. So It is interesting. There's going to be some things that we're going to believe, oh, every kid does that, and it'll turn out that maybe that's not the case based on some cultural differences.
Yeah. Yeah, always good to, I think even if you weren't able to do sleepovers or having dinner or something, going over to somebody else's house and going, wow, they all eat dinner in front of the TV, or they sit down with linen napkin, like, wow, this is different. And I think that that's culturally, good for any child. Anything else you'd like to add to that?
I think that you definitely covered that piece of it's really, I think, important for every family to understand like what cultural values make us our family, and how can we hold those to be true, and how can we celebrate how other families might do things, but kind of have this sense of family cohesion of this is what makes us us. This is what's special and good about our family, and kind of holding that there are so many ways that you can be in a family.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I want to thank our panelists, Dr. Dandy Allard, Dr. Judith Christensen, and Ann Meehan for their time and expertise tonight, and for those of you who called in or emailed questions. Please join Dr. Mary Owen next Thursday for a program on Indigenous health, when her guests will be Dr. Arnie Vinio, Roxanne DeLille, and Ricky Defoe. I'm Mary Morehouse. For the guests and crew here at PBS North, thank you for watching. Good night.